8. Flooded F-16s. In early 2020, the weather forecast predicted unusually heavy rains in Israel, yet the military failed to move 8 of its F-16 fighter jets from their underground hangars at Hatzor Air Base to higher ground. A nearby creek overflowed and flooded the hangars, and the expensive aircraft were heavily damaged. Officials initially kept the incident under wraps, but the Israeli Air Force acknowledged it several days later. In a statement, an IAF official said that the Air Force prepared accordingly for the extreme weather conditions, but that parts of the base nevertheless became inundated with water. He further explained that the military's main priority was to protect human life, and that equipment and weapons were of secondary importance. The base reportedly remained dry until the early morning hours, when over 1.7 million cubic feet of water suddenly came rushing in, knocking down cement walls. But the official admitted that the Air Force made a mistake by not evacuating the hangars, where the water reached nearly 5 feet deep. He vowed to investigate the matter. The good news is that only 3 of the 8 jets were seriously damaged. They were all repaired and returned to service within a week. 7. The Blue Devil Airship. Around 2010, the Pentagon dished out $200 million for what Army officials insisted was an urgently needed giant spy blimp. The end product was the 300-foot-long helium-filled pilotless robotic Blue Devil Airship. Officially dubbed the Long Endurance Multi-Intelligence Vehicle, or LEMV, it was designed for performing surveillance missions over Afghanistan. For 3 weeks at a time, the blimp would travel at high altitudes far out of the range of enemy gunfire, in places that were deemed too dangerous for human missions, collecting information with its ultra-advanced sensors and other equipment. In theory, a high-functioning futuristic war blimp is a great idea for the military. These vehicles would be cheaper to operate, easier to maintain, and would fly longer than existing warplanes. Until the LEMV project came along, the last time the US military had used airships was during the 1960s, when the Navy retired the last of its fleet. When the concept was revived a half-century later, it seemed like an ideal way to monitor elusive insurgents and gather intelligence on hard-to-reach enemy forces. But the project never came to fruition. As it turned out, the Blue Devil Airship turned out to be far less sophisticated than it was cracked up to be. It was oversold by its advocates, who exaggerated its capabilities, which only piled onto the pressure to create a working blimp. Long story short, the endeavor became increasingly costly as these expectations grew. Each LEMV was only supposed to cost $150 million, and a working prototype was supposed to be developed within 2 years. It didn't take long for the projected cost of each balloon to rise to $270 million, and for the timeline for the prototype's completion to jump from 1.5 years to 3 years. After just one brief test flight, the Army cancelled the project, and the ambitious idea of an advanced military airship was abandoned once and for all. 6. The Sparrow Elimination Campaign. During China's Great Leap Forward from 1958 to 1962, the military and government sought to eliminate rats, flies, mosquitoes, and sparrows in what was known as the Four Pests Campaign. The elimination of sparrows, dubbed the Smash Sparrows Campaign or Eliminate Sparrows Campaign, stemmed from the belief that the birds were eating too much of the farmers' grain and fruit. Chinese civilians were encouraged to participate in the effort by killing as many sparrows as possible, and they gladly obliged. One way they did this was by banging pots, pans, and other loud objects outside, which made sparrows so afraid to land that they flew until they dropped out of the sky from exhaustion and died. People also shot sparrows with guns and destroyed the birds' nests and eggs. To provide an additional incentive, awards were given out to civilians who shot the most sparrows in a day in their communities. The campaign was so successful that sparrows nearly went extinct in China. But it backfired because sparrows were one of the only predators who ate locusts. Without the species around to prey on the insects, the locust population exploded. And locusts not only eat grains and fruit, but they also feast on plants. They wiped out crops across the country to a way worse degree than sparrows ever did, sparking one of the worst famines in human history. After realizing the gravity of the mistake, the state removed sparrows from the four-pest campaign and refocused its attention toward bedbugs. Have you heard about this before? Tell us in the comments and hit subscribe while you're at it. 5. B-2 bomber crash. The American-made Northrop Grumman B-2 stealth bomber was an extremely expensive but mostly successful project. It was developed in complete secrecy and made its first public flight in 1989, more than 33 years ago. Until recently, there were 20 B-2s in service with the US Air Force, with only one having been lost. The incident happened in 2008 at Andersen Air Force Base in Guam, where a B-2 bomber nicknamed the Spirit of Kansas crashed on the runway shortly after takeoff due to a sensor malfunction. It was the first ever crash of a B-2. The two-officer crew, Major Ryan Link and Captain Justin Grieve, tried but failed to gain control over the fighter jet. As one of the wingtips touched the ground, the pair ejected. Thankfully, they survived. There were no munitions on board, which could have made the situation worse. One pilot was treated and released, while the other was hospitalized for his injuries. By then, the Spirit of Kansas had logged 5,100 flight hours. And the Air Force definitely didn't get its money's worth out of the jet before the accident, which came at a loss of $1.4 billion, around $1.9 billion today when adjusted for inflation. While this was the only B-2 loss to date, there have been more problems with the aircraft since then. The Air Force previously said that they hope to continue using the jets until 2032, but the entire fleet is temporarily grounded due to an in-flight malfunction that occurred in late 2022. During an emergency landing, the plane veered off the runway and was damaged in a fire. Air officials have declined to elaborate any further on the situation, beyond stating that an investigation is ongoing. 4. The Isaac Barra submarine. In 2013, the Spanish government spent $2.2 billion on the development of a new high-tech submarine called the Isaac Barra. Also known as the S-80, the vessel was designed to replace the country's aging diesel-electric Cold War-era submarines. Named for the naval engineer who built Spain's first electric-powered submarine in 1888, the Isaac Barra was meant to be the first of an entirely new fleet of sophisticated subs with advanced fuel and engine features. It was first commissioned in 2003, but at the time the country's economic situation wasn't great, and it only got worse over the following years, delaying the beginning of the project for an entire decade. During the development phases, engineers discovered that the Isaac Barra was about 100 tons too heavy, which meant that it wouldn't be able to surface, even if it happened to function just fine otherwise. And the extremely costly mistake boiled down to a misplaced decimal point, thanks to one of the designers. To remedy the issue, the shipbuilder, Navantia, summoned help from experts who recommended increasing the Isaac Barra's overall size. This would hopefully enable it to rise to the surface despite being far heavier than intended. The sub was lengthened by more than 30 feet, and by all appearances, it seemed as though the problem was solved. 5 years later, while it was still being built, Spanish authorities realized the Isaac Barra was too big for the port of Cartagena where it was being constructed. As if the miscalculation of the sub's weight wasn't expensive enough to begin with, the government was left with no choice but to either abandon the project or expand the port. They opted for the latter, and the vessel is slated to become operational by 2027, assuming there are no more unexpected issues. 3. CAMUN Contamination. If you live in the United States, chances are you've seen TV commercials encouraging former residents of the Camp Lejeune Marine Corps Base in North Carolina to seek compensation for health problems from contaminated water. That's because the American government is still paying the tab for what can only be described as a decades-long nightmare that ruined an unknown number of lives. The tap water at Camp Lejeune was heavily contaminated with dangerous toxins from 1953 to at least 1987. For many years, soldiers and their families bathed in and drank the poisonous water, completely unaware that it contained concentrations of hazardous chemicals ranging from 240 to 3,400 times the legally permitted safety levels. The first concrete evidence of the water contamination was discovered during the 1980s, when the water was tested for certain chemicals for the first time under newly imposed government regulations. Reports initially claimed that the water couldn't be linked to any serious long-term health problems, despite the presence of benzene, degreaser, vinyl chloride, dry cleaning solvent, and other toxins. Even after word of the contamination started to spread and the high cancer and birth defect rates among former Camp Lejeune residents became evident, the government continued to deny the toxic water's effect on human health. Victims began to accuse Marine Corps leaders of having early knowledge of the problem and failing to take action. As more details came to light, it was revealed that hazardous waste was improperly dumped on the base for years. Over 800,000 gallons of benzene leaked into the ground and toxified the tap water. And the Marine Corps was allegedly aware of this, but conveniently left the information out of a health report that had submitted to the federal government for review in 1992. Authorities finally publicly acknowledged the severity of the problem in 2009. 3 years later, President Barack Obama signed the long-overdue Janie Ensminger Act into law to provide medical care for the victims. Over 850 former Camp Lejeune residents have filed claims totaling nearly $4 billion. The true extent of the damage will never be known, since people who once lived at the base are spread out all over the world, but up to 1 million people are thought to have been poisoned. 2. AC-130J Ghost Rider. The heavily armed Lockheed AC-130 is a ground attack variant of the C-130 Hercules. It's armed to the hilt with weapons that are integrated with sophisticated sensors, navigation, and fire control systems. But the US Air Force seems to be encountering chronic issues with some of the weapons on its AC-130J Ghost Rider variant, and correcting them is proving to be a costly endeavor. In 2019, a Pentagon report revealed that the newest fleet of AC-130J Ghost Rider gunships was combat-ready. But according to the fine print, the aircraft's 30mm and 105mm guns were experiencing continuous problems with poor accuracy, unreliable ammunition, and other problems. More specifically, one of the plane's cannons was struggling to make adjustments for shifts in position and altitude, something it was supposed to do automatically. During tests in 2017, the gun fell out of alignment at least once and needed to be recalibrated. When the gunners tried to recalibrate the weapon, they inadvertently threw off the positioning of the mounting hardware. And at its maximum firing rate of 200 rounds per minute, the gun vibrated so violently that its accuracy was regularly interrupted anyway. For a plane that's supposed to be known for its precision tools, these effectiveness issues are simply unacceptable. In addition to the gun issues, pilots struggled to keep the aircraft under control during its initial test flight, and they ended up flipping the plane. Thankfully, nobody was injured, but that particular AC-130J Ghost Rider never took to the skies again. 1. F35 Failure. The F-35 was supposed to be the world's most advanced stealth fighter jet. It was designed by Lockheed Martin in partnership with the American government and several allies, including the UK, Italy, Denmark, the Netherlands, Norway, Australia, and Canada, as a replacement for aging Cold War-era fighter jets. The program's official website boasts that the F-35 is the world's most survivable and lethal fighter aircraft. But the jet has been met with seemingly constant criticisms for its alleged shortcomings, and the problems only seem to be mounting with time. Some even say that the project is a complete failure. Two of the F-35's original main selling points were that it would be lightweight and affordable. But the technology that was added to the design over the years made the plane increasingly heavy and expensive. So far, the aircraft has proven to be unreliable, high maintenance, and extremely costly, with each jet coming with a price tag of around $100 million. And it's not even ideal for everyday use, according to Air Force Chief of Staff General Charles Brown Jr., which means that the F-35 failed to fulfill the need for what he describes as low-end operations. Simply put, in their effort to maximize its capabilities, its designers over-equipped it, and the results appear to be utterly purpose-defeating. According to a 2022 press release, officials were trying to decide if and how it might be possible to design and build an affordable, lightweight fighter jet. But even a slight misstep could result in even more money, time and effort being wasted on a plane that's already come at more than 50% more than its original cost. Thanks for watching. Which one of these expensive military mistakes do you think could have been avoided? Tell us in the comments below and hit subscribe while you're at it. See you next time. Bye.